So again, there are four classes: seraphim, cherubim, and then the regular angels and the archangels. Of course, the three that are mentioned, of course, Lucifer, that's mentioned in Isaiah 14. Gabriel, Luke 1:19. Michael, Revelation 12:7. That's where they're mentioned by name. So those are at least three archangels. And remember, when Lucifer rebelled, it says he took 1/3 of them with the tail. As he, in other words, he convinced them to follow him. And if you, the Bible still doesn't say. Now look at different translations. Looked at Moffat, and I have a revised translation. It says 10,000 times 10,000. That's 100 million. So the best we can figure is probably about 200 million around God. And Satan took about 100 million with him because he took about 1/3 of the angels with him as he left. So if you go to Revelation 5:11, now I think the other translation I was looking at this morning, the New Revised, it said myriads and myriads, but King James, it says 10,000 times 10,000, that's 100 million. And it says it twice, so there's probably at least 200 million. Let me read it here. Revelation 5, verse 11. And I beheld, and I heard the voice of many angels round about the throne, and the beasts, and the elders. And the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000. That's 100 million. And thousands of thousands. Now, in my other translation, it says there were myriads and myriads. So again, it just depends on what translation you read and so forth. And in Revelation 12:4, it reads, and starting with verse 3, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew the 1/3 part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered. So again, Satan drew about 1/3 with him. And if you read in Hebrews 1:7 and Hebrews 1:4, it tells you that angels are spirits used to minister and to help. The listing of the archangels, again, 1 Thessalonians 4:16, Jude 1:19, that just names them. Of course, Lucifer is named in Isaiah 14. Of course, when the angels rebelled, they became evil spirits, or as we usually say, they became demons. And again, the different translations give different names. One, it says they were ministering spirits, and I had another one here. Anyway, it doesn't always say angels. Sometimes we'll say sons of God, using capital letters and so forth. So there were various ways of denoting angels and so forth. So again, with the different classes of angels and so forth, since they're invisible, there's no way you can say you can't measure them. And as I said, if you I think, and I was reading this morning about Balaam. Remember what happened with Balaam's donkey? Now, the little smart translation I have, it says Balaam's donkey, so I'll just keep it on the simple tongue and say Balaam's donkey. And it says the angel appeared in front. First it says it appears in front of Balaam's donkey. And Balaam didn't see it, so what did he do? Pow, he hit the donkey.
Yeah.
And so it says the angel moved on up and stood over to the side, and the donkey had to go the other way, and he stopped again. Balaam hit him a second time. Wow! And then a third time he stood away where the donkey couldn't go around, and hit him a third time, And God, remember, caused the donkey to speak. He said, now what have I done to you for you to hit me these 3 times? And then by that time, of course, God allowed Balaam to see the invisible angel. He made the angel was allowed to materialize. So again, as I said, since the Lord said teachers don't know everything, even as Christians, no matter how converted you are, you don't know everything because certain things God is not allowing. And I think about the power of God. Now, and listening to the preachers and so forth, just talking yesterday about Damascus is going to be destroyed. And by morning there was nothing left, which indicates it's probably going to be a nuclear explosion, something that will eventually destroy Damascus. And it says nothing will be there. They're just animals and so forth. But God is going to always keep the supreme power in himself. He's the one that sustains it. If they were to set off the bomb that would destroy everything, God has the power to even restore. So if they do, and then if you remember what it says in Matthew 24, it says, unless Christ would intervene, there would no flesh be saved. So he's probably going to intervene after they set off enough nuclear weapons to probably start a chain reaction that would just cause the oxygen or carbon dioxide or whatever just to disappear. So God's going to intervene and stop it. So, and he could probably use the angels to do certain things too, but he has the power to stop any reaction. And how does he know Israel won't be destroyed by Iran or Syria, some of these places? Because he has the power. He knows he has angels there and so forth. If they were to set off, he could cause it to misfire. And I think about it in World War II where they dropped the bomb. They thought the cloud would only go so far. They went so many times further than they thought it was going to go. But again, since God is in charge and he has the power, and think about the destroying angels with Sodom and Gomorrah, how they destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, just blew it up. How much power do they have? We have no idea. So again, we can only go. Now, if you believe the Bible at all, you have to believe there are angels because Jesus Christ said there are angels. And he referred to them many times over in many different situations and so forth. Remember when the angel came to Joseph in a dream? The only reason we know is by Christ telling us and so forth. So again, angels are creations of God who are ministering spirits to help us, and they can trigger thoughts and so forth. It's a matter of whether we want to follow those thoughts. So whatever is good and right, I think about Philippians 4:8, those things which are pure and just and good and so forth. Those are things you think on. And if angels were allowed to materialize, they would only tell you about the good. Now the evil angels, remember, Satan and his demons are restrained from what they are allowed to do. So they can do certain things, but if you have the Spirit of God, you will know the difference. Now, just one little example would be just playing the Sabbath. You know what you should or should not do on the Sabbath. Nobody has to say, you shouldn't do this or that or the other. There are just certain things that are basic and are within good taste and so forth that you would do on the Sabbath. So just by common sense, if you read whatsoever things are good and pure and so forth, it says to think on those things. So, again, without having any references, no electronic gears or anything like that to measure them, we know angels exist. And as I said, there are at least 4 different classes. We have the archangels, the seraphim, the cherubim, and so forth. And then, of course, this is kind of on a little satellite too. It says God has something like, 30,000 chariots. Are they invisible? Probably so. Can they be guided by the angels? Possibly so. If God wants to relax and and ride in the chariots and let the angels guide, he could probably do that too. So again, there's so much out there that we cannot know because we are physical human beings. So in the angelic world, God has designed it and he knows what he's doing. So all you have to do is have faith in God and let him show us that we don't know everything and that God is in charge. So that's what it says about the angelic realm.
Well, I guess this is the day for angels. Because we are going into Daniel chapter 10. Daniel chapter 10, verse 1. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar. The message was true, but the appointed time was long, and he understood the message and had understanding of the vision. Now, this is, according to Bollinger, of course, 424 BC. Daniel is 89. This is his last writing, because chapter 10, 11, and 12 is all one of the same message. There shouldn't even be any chapter breaks. It's all the same message from the angel. It's answer to prayer, and it contains the big long prophecy. Daniel understood the message and the vision, and he says it concerned a long time and a lot of war. Verse 2 says, in those days I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. Mourning, grieving 21 days. I ate no pleasant bread or food, no meat or wine came into my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. So he makes the point of saying that he was mourning, he was grieving, he didn't have any wine, didn't have any meat, and he didn't have any pleasant bread. Now on the 24th day of the 1st month, as I was by the side of the great river, that is the Tigris, so this is the 24th of the 1st month. It was the 24th of Nisan, or Abib. So it sounds like he kept the days of unleavened bread 21 days. That's what it sounds like. Starting at the beginning of the month on day 3 and ending on day 24, 3 days after unleavened bread. Because he makes a point of saying he ate no pleasant bread, which infers that he ate the bread of affliction, which is unleavened bread. And it was the time of unleavened bread because it was the 1st month, and unleavened bread starts on the 15th day of the 1st month. So he just extended it to express his feelings and what he was trying to express in his relationship with God. And I would assume that he was probably a little depressed because it was the beginning of another year that he was away from home. This is 2 years after the prayer and the prophecy in chapter 9. And if you remember back then, he got the prophecy and the interpretation that said, from the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. So this is 2 years later, and he's thinking, am I ever going to go home? It's been 2 years since all this is going on. You know, what's happening? You know, am I ever going to get there? And you try and put yourself in Daniel's shoes. I can remember back when I was 2, 3, 4 years old where I lived. I can go back there anytime I want and look at the place. It's 1 block from Tower Grove Park. It was a good neighborhood back then. And when I was 5 years old, we moved down about a mile from Riverty Pear, the city limits. And I can go back there anytime I want and look at that place. There are the places, I've lived in since then. I can go back anytime I want, and they're still there. They've changed, from one reason or another, but, they're still there. Timmy sent me some photos that he took from Google Earth, I think, of the place that we lived back in Lime. And I looked at the picture and I thought, because he was 5 or 6 when we moved, and he's looking at that and he's thinking, well, does it look familiar to you? And I says, well, it's the same, but they've changed it. There's 2 trees growing up front. They tore off the front porch, you know, but it's the same place. It's just changed. So, and all of you can do the same thing, probably. You can go back to where, you know, you as a child and see the place where you grew up and reminisce and think about all the different things that you did at different ages, you know. And Daniel can't. You know, he was like 17 when he was taken captive, and he's never seen his home again. And for all he knows, it's in ruins because Nebuchadnezzar destroyed so much of the place when he destroyed Jerusalem. And you know, he's 89 years old, and he's thinking, will I ever get to see my home? Will I ever get to go back and think? So you can imagine, after hearing that the Jerusalem was going to be rebuilt, he's thinking, oh, you know, it's just a matter of time. Maybe I'll get back there, but didn't happen. So he says, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose waist was girded with the gold of Uphaz. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like torches of fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze in color, and the sound of his words like the voice of a multitude. So Daniel is describing this angel that he saw, that has in one section, you know, the description of an angel, and another section it's got the similar descriptions of Christ. And so what he's seeing is an angel in its power, as opposed to the angels that went down with Christ to see Abraham, then went on to Sodom and Gomorrah and met Lot. They appeared as men. They just manifested themselves as a human being, limited their power, and just did, acted like an average person. But what Daniel is seeing here is the angel is allowing him to see what an angel looks like in its power, as a spirit being, as we are going to someday attain that power and just pure energy shining. It's just a matter of time. We're going to have that power and that energy. So Daniel sees this vision. He says, I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men who were with me did not see the vision, but a great terror fell upon them, so that they fled to hide themselves. So if they heard the voice that sounded like the voice of a multitude or whatever, and they just ran for cover. Get out of here. Therefore I was left alone when I saw this great vision, and no strength remained in me, for my vigor was turned to frailty in me, and I retained no strength. In other words, he fainted. That's what happened to him. He just collapsed and fainted. Yet I heard the sound of his words, and while I heard the sound of his words, I was in a deep sleep on my face, with my face to the ground. So he saw this angel and heard the sound of his voice. He just fainted. And as he was coming to, he heard his voice, and he was just laying on his face in the dirt. Suddenly a hand touched me, which made me tremble on my knees and on the palms of my hands. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you, and stand upright. Because Daniel was on his hands and knees after he touched him, because he was unconscious. He fainted. He touched him. He got some strength. He got up. He's on his hands and knees. He didn't fall to his hands and knees, because if he would, what would have happened? The angel would have said, don't bow to me. I'm a servant just like you. Just like the angels always say. So he didn't bow. He fainted, and he was getting back up on his hands and knees, and the angel said, stand upright. For I have now been sent to you. While he was speaking this word to me, I stood trembling. So even though he's standing, he's trembling. Well, I think you look around society today, and most people 89 years old have a lot of trouble standing and walking without seeing a great vision to terrify them. So you can imagine that he's trembling. Then he said to me, do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. So once again, Daniel is praying, and he's asking for understanding of what he is reading and possible visions and dreams. You wouldn't forget the dreams, the visions, or visits from angels that you had. You'd be thinking about them. They'd just be popping up in your mind all the time. You'd be thinking, did that really happen? Is this real? But see, Daniel, he can go back and read what he wrote about what he saw and what he heard. And he's just going over this all the time, because how many people have been privileged to have the kind of dreams, visions, and visits from angels to explain to him what the visions and dreams were all about? You wouldn't forget it. You'd be thinking about it all the time. We'd be replaying it over and over again in our mind, just like you do a lot of other things, trying to get a better meaning, a better understanding of what it was all about. And Daniel is no different. He's replaying these things over and over in his mind as he's reading what he wrote, and he's remembering what happened. He's got the picture in his mind, and he's going over and over and over again what these things were. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. And behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia from the first day. And we know from the previous chapter that Gabriel was sent while Daniel was still praying. And he was there in a few seconds, a minute or two. But in this case, the angel, and we're not sure who the angel was withstood for 21 days. The whole time Daniel was mourning and eating no pleasant bread, the angel was trying to get to him with the message. Daniel didn't give up. For 21 days he kept praying. He kept eating no pleasant bread. He kept doing what he was doing, mourning. He didn't anoint himself. He just kept doing what he was doing, waiting for an answer. The angel was fighting with the prince of Persia, the spiritual prince of Persia, and had to be helped by Michael. Now, just to remember what that's about, Ephesians chapter 6. Just read one verse here in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12. It says, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. And that would also imply each other, because we're flesh and blood. We don't wrestle against each other. When something is wrong in the church, something's wrong between brothers and sisters in the church, you can bet there's an outside force that is stirring up something, that is behind it, that is causing the trouble. But we don't think that because we don't see it. We start pointing the finger at each other. He said, but we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in high office. Spiritual wickedness in high office. Princes and kings generals, colonels. Yeah. Demonic forces influence and even control some of the leaders of nations, such as those in the Middle East. And no wonder. Turn over to Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5. And in verse 7, it says, "And he cried out with a loud voice and said, What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me. For he had said to him, Come out of the man, unclean spirit." So back in verse 6, it says, when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him. Because the demon that was in this man recognized Jesus. He knew who he was. After all, the demon at one point back in eternity had been in heaven. So he recognized Jesus. And Jesus said to him, "What is your name?" And he answered, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Also, he begged him earnestly that he would not send them out of the country. Now a large herd of swine was feeding there near the mountains. So all the demons begged him, saying, "Send us to the swine, that we may enter them." Plural, all the demons, because we are many. So, at once Jesus gave them permission, and the unclean spirits went out and entered the swine. There were about 2,000, and the herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea and drowned in the sea. So, there was at least 2,000, and I believe in the concordance it says that a Roman legion was 6,000. So, somewhere between 2,000 and 6,000 was the number of demons that were inside this guy. Now, just try and imagine the kind of shape this guy was in. No wonder he was in the fire, in the water, breaking shackles and chains. And if you had several thousand voices and conversations going on in your head at one time, you'd be nuts too. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't want to live. You'd be throwing yourself in the fire and throwing yourself in the water, trying to kill yourself. And demons, no. They don't want you dead. They want to torment you. So he's cast out, and they go into the swine. The swine, go nuts, run right into the sea and drown. And so the demons are there. They're there. All those demons are still there today, causing all the problems that are in the Middle East. Thousands of them, just from that one verse. He said, they begged him, "Don't cast us out of the country." So he did. They're still there. They're right there in the Middle East, thousands of demons causing all the trouble. So how can you even think that anything is ever going to come to any good before the kingdom of God in the Middle East? It doesn't stand a chance. It doesn't stand a chance. So back in Daniel 10, verse 14, he says, "Now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision refers to many days yet to come." So the main focus, according to the angel and his message, the main focus is on the Jews and Jerusalem at the end time. But leading up to that, there's a lot of time and the prophecies of chapter 11. When he had spoken such words to me, I turned my face toward the ground and became speechless. And suddenly one having the likeness of the sons of men touched my lips. Then I opened my mouth and spoke, saying to him who stood before me, "My Lord, because of the vision, my sorrows have overwhelmed me, and I have retained no strength. For how can this servant of my Lord talk with you, my Lord, as for me no strength remains in me now, nor is there any breath left in me?" So he's ready to faint once again. Then again, the one having the likeness of a man touched me and strengthened me. And I said, And he said, O man greatly beloved, fear not. Peace to you. Be strong. Yes, be strong. So when he spoke to me, I was strengthened, and said, let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. You can just imagine he's going through it. He said, give me a break. I'm 89 years old. How much do you think I can handle? You know? So, then he said to him, do you know why I have come to you? Well, yeah, because he told us back in verse 14. Why have I come? To make you understand, and that includes demonic activity in the wars of men, and how God is in control to bring about his plan, which is a long plan, which Daniel is about to get details of. And now I must return to fight with the prince of Persia, and when I have gone forth, indeed, the prince of Greece will come. But I will tell you what is noted in the scripture of truth. That is, in the writings of what is real. That's the literal translation of what he's saying. In the writings of what is real as opposed to what is false. No one upholds me against these except Michael, your prince. Michael, your prince. Now, we know that Michael is a warring archangel. We know that. Jude, verse 9. Jude, verse 9 tells us, yet Michael, the archangel, in contending with the devil when he disputed about the body of Moses, dared not bring against him a reviling accusation, but said, the Lord rebuke you. And in Revelation 12, of course, in verse 7, he says, and war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought. But they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. Now, we don't know who this angel is that is speaking with Daniel. He doesn't give us his name in chapter 10. Gabriel is mentioned twice in chapter 8 and 9. And Daniel refers to him as the man. And in Luke, he's mentioned twice in chapter 1 of Luke. And both times it says the angel. It doesn't say the archangel. So, because he's one of the three angels that are mentioned by name, we assume that he is an archangel. But it doesn't come right out and say that. Now, in verse 13, it says that Michael is one of the chief princes, which is archangel. He's one of the archangels, which is plural. So we know there's more than one. And we assume that it was Lucifer and Michael and Gabriel. But we're just assuming that because it doesn't really give us more details than that. So the only thing that we do know is that Gabriel is mentioned 4 times, and each time he's a messenger. There's nothing about him fighting or warring or anything. He's a messenger. We don't know if this is him or not. There is a similar wording that he uses back in chapter 8 when Gabriel comes to him. In verse 18, he says, now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground, and he touched me and stood me upright. So there's a similarity there, the same type of circumstance. But whether or not it was the same angel, it doesn't say. But we assume that. But that's all it is an assumption. Someday we will know. So chapter 11 says, also in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and strengthen him. So the angel probably had to strengthen him to issue the decree to rebuild the temple. Remember, the word Darius is a descriptive term, a title, and is the same thing as Caesar. Now, how many Caesars were there? Just oodles and gobs. So this is actually Cyrus, the same person he was talking about, and this was one of his descriptive terms. So back in 2 Chronicles 36, which goes hand in hand with this, 2 Chronicles 36 and in verse 22, which is of course repeated in the chapter 1 of Ezra, it says, "Now in the first year of Cyrus king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all the kingdom, and also put it in writing, saying, Thus says Cyrus king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth, the Lord God of heaven has given me, and he has commanded me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is among you of all his people? May the Lord his God be with him, and let him go up." So God had to stir up the spirit of Cyrus to issue the proclamation, and that's what the angel is saying. He says, I had to stand up to strengthen and confirm him. Well, if you were going to make a proclamation which was probably going to go against your own people and the feelings of so many other people, because the Jews were hated by so many people, you would have needed a little push too, So, but some of the commentaries, because of the sentence structure, because if your Bible is like mine, it's got part of verse 21 and chapter 1 of verse 11, or chapter 11 verse 1 in parentheses. I don't know if yours has that, but mine has that. So because of the sentence structure, there are some commentaries that suggest that the angel stood to strengthen Michael. But the two Hebrew words, strengthen and confirm, would suggested Darius or Cyrus was the one, because the word means to strengthen, to encourage or protect or be a fortress for, which is what Cyrus would need, since he was going up against, maybe the wishes of his own people. If Michael needed help, you'd need to ask why. Because Michael and his angels defeated Satan and his angels in heaven. Why would he need help to fight a lesser than Satan as the prince of Persia? So I don't see it that way. I think it's exactly what it is, and it's referenced back to 2 Chronicles, that God used the angel to stir up and support Cyrus to issue the proclamation to rebuild the temple. And he goes on and says, "Now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than them all. By his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece." So 4 more kings in Persia, as the Grecian Empire then begins to become stronger. "Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will," which was Alexander the Great. "And when he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken up and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not among his posterity, nor according to his dominion with which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be uprooted even for others besides these." So it was divided between his 4 generals. And this is given when he gave the prophecy, or when Gabriel gave the prophecy to him back in chapter 8 and in verse 20, when he says, "The ram which you saw having the 2 horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia. And the male goat is the kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between its eyes is the first king. And as for the broken horn, the 4 that stood up in its place, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of that nation, but not with its power." So what he's doing in chapter 11 is a long description of that little explanation. So he's going to go into a long description. And he begins in verse 5. He says, "Also the king of the south shall become strong, as well as one of his princes, and he shall gain power over him and have dominion. His dominion shall be great dominion." Now from verse 5 to verse 20, we're going to be dealing with various kings of the south and the north, which I went over in the sermon, King of the South. The four generals came to be two, the strongest, who continually fought and made treaties, broke treaties, arranged marriages, murder, betrayal, and all the usual stuff. And it also includes the famous Cleopatra. If you wonder where she fits in history, she's in Daniel chapter 11. So in verse 6 then he goes on and says, "At the end of some years they shall join forces, for the daughter of the king of the south shall go to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of her authority, and neither he nor his authority shall stand, but she shall be given up, but shall be given up, she shall be given up, and those who brought her, and with him who begot her, and with him who strengthened her in those times." You can almost imagine as Daniel's writing all this down, he's listening to all this and he's writing it down, and he's saying to himself, "What?" "But from a branch of her roots one shall arise in his place, who shall come with an army, enter the fortress of the king of the north, and deal with them and prevail. And he shall also carry their gods captive to Egypt, with their princes and their precious articles of silver and gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. Also the king of the north shall come to the kingdom of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. However, his sons shall stir up strife, and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overwhelm and pass through, then he shall return to his fortress and stir up strife. And the king of the south shall be moved with rage, and go out and fight with him, with the king of the north, who shall muster a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into the hand of his enemy. When he has taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he will cast down tens of thousands, but shall not prevail. For the king of the north will return and muster a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come at the end of some years with a great army and much equipment. Now in those times many shall rise up against the king of the south. Also violent men of your people shall exalt themselves in fulfillment of the vision, but they shall fall. So the king of the north shall come and build a siege mound, and take a fortified city, and the forces of the south shall not withstand him. Even his choice troops shall have no strength to resist. But he who comes against him shall do according to his own will, and no one shall stand against him. He shall stand in the glorious land with destruction in his power. He shall also set his face to enter the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do, and he shall give him the daughter of women to destroy it, but she shall not stand with him or be with him. After this he shall turn and face the coastlands, and shall take many, but a ruler shall bring the reproach against them to an end, and with the reproach removed he shall turn back on him. Then he shall turn his face toward the fortress of his own land, and he shall stumble and fall, and shall not be found. There shall also arise in his place one who imposes taxes on the glorious kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, but not in battle or anger. Now you can imagine as Daniel's writing all this down, he's just trying to wonder how many years is this taking place, and who's killing who and why. But just so you get a little bit of a and I think I went over this when I did the King of the South, but just to give you a little bit of an idea of what all this means, Haley's Bible Handbook, back in verse 2, you get 3 kings in Persia, and verse 3, a mighty king, Alexander the Great, fourfold division of his kingdom. Verse 4, Greece, Asia Minor, Syria, and Egypt. The king of the south, verse 5, is Ptolemy the first of Egypt, which is why, we always say the king of the south is Egypt. And so when we look to the future, to the end time, the king of the north and the king of the south fighting each other, when you think of the king of the south, you have to think of Egypt. However, my own belief is if the king of the north is a group of 10 nations, then it only stands to reason that the king of the south is also going to be a group of nations. So you wouldn't look just to Egypt, but a confederation of Muslim nations that were going to join together. I mean, that's the only thing that really would make sense. Why would Egypt try to go against Europe by itself? So, one of his princes, Seleucus Nicator, originally an officer under Ptolemy I, became king of Syria, the most powerful of Alexander's successors. Now, and that's the other side of the coin. And we brought that out at the feast when we were having a Bible study. Originally, when the kingdom split up, it was the Macedonian kingdom, the Grecian kingdom, the Grecian empire that split. All 4 divisions were Greek. The king of the south was Greek. It was a Greek that was in charge of Egypt, and it was a Greek that was in charge of Syria. So it was, the Greek kings were fighting each other. They were members of the Grecian empire. And the king of the north was in Syria, which makes you a little confusing. But what you have to remember is that it was the Grecian empire and was part of Greece, and Greece is part of Europe. So these are types of what to look for and not the actual model. Just like it's not going to be just Egypt, there's going to be a group. So it's not, everything isn't just, black and white, especially when it comes to prophecy. Verse 6, the daughter, Bernice, daughter of Ptolemy II, was given in marriage to Antiochus II and was murdered. A shoot from her roots, verse 7, Ptolemy III, brother of Bernice, in retaliation, invaded Syria and won a great victory. The 2 sons, in verse 10, in verse 11 and 12, Ptolemy IV defeated Antiochus III with a great loss of battle at Raphia near Egypt. Antiochus III, after 14 years, returned with a great army against Egypt. Verse 14, the Jews helped Antiochus. Verse 15, he defeated the forces of Egypt. And Antiochus conquered Palestine. Verse 17, Antiochus gave his daughter Cleopatra in treacherous marriage alliance to Ptolemy V, hoping through her to get control of Egypt. But she stood with her husband. And 18 and 19, Antiochus then invaded Asia Minor and Greece and was defeated by the Roman army, returned to his own land, and was slain. So that's the battles of all the stuff you read about here from verse 3 to verse 20. Verse 21 begins the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes. This character, Antiochus Epiphanes, doesn't change. We're going to read from verse 21 right on through, and the next thing you're going to be reading is going to say, at the time of the end, the king of the north and the king of the south, and it hasn't said, this king got killed and this one stood in this place, as you've been reading so far. So the same character, the same personality that we're going to read about as in Antiochus Epiphanes is the same as the end time beast. Antiochus Epiphanes is a type of the beast. He will do some of the things that the beast is going to do at the end time. He's just, prophecy is so many times type and antitype. Sometimes things are fulfilled 3 times. There's a type, and then there's another type, it's fulfilled again, and then it's fulfilled a 3rd time. So when we think of Antiochus Epiphanes and what he did, as we'll get to next time, that he invades Jerusalem and he desecrates the temple and he offers swine's blood on the altar. And that has a lot to do with Daniel chapter 8. Well, that was the abomination of desolation. And then Jesus said, when you see the abomination of desolation, well, it happened again in 70 AD when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem and the temple. And yet he says it's going to happen at the end time. So there's 3 fulfillments of this particular prophecy. And that's what we're going to be seeing at the end time. Because he makes the point of saying it's going to be the end time. Christ does in Matthew 24. So we know it's going to happen yet again in the future. So next time we will finish 11 and go right through 12 to the end, because it's all one of the same person, and it blends right in with the beast. And we'll see what happened in history, and it will give us an idea of what we're looking at in the future, because that's what part of what prophecy is about. So when we see it happen, we know God's hand was in it, and God has ordained it. God is bringing it to pass. So we don't worry and fret, get anxious, but we know this is God. He's doing it. He's in control. And it's just a matter of waiting and taking it day by day to get through it. So I'm going to leave it there, and we'll pick the rest up next time.